One of the things in comic books that I imagine everyone has noticed is that events essentially mean nothing anymore. And I read an article from a comic book store owner talking about some of the events and how it was affecting him and his business. I want to talk about that with my good friend, comic book writer, comic book editor, writer for season 4 of Young Justice, Aaron Sparrow. How you doing, Aaron?
Doing well. I've been told that when people just listen to us, they can't tell the difference between us. They have to actually watch. So should I start doing like a funny voice? What should I do? What's the solution? I think
you should do like a Swiss voice. I think that would probably be good. It would differentiate.
I'll just do the Joker. Well, Wes, let me tell you.
We wouldn't want anyone getting confused when we're having conversations.
Right? Apparently I talk too fast too, so you can't listen to us at 1.5 speed because I just become unintelligible.
You're normally unintelligible. People just don't realize that they're 1.5 speed.
That's fair.
It's a godsend.
All right, let me spew some nonsense then. Let's go.
So, Aaron, you worked at a comic shop. You still work at the shops, but they are much less focused on comic shops, specifically new comics, and they kind of gone into collectibles and stuff like that. But were they also noticing or experiencing the event fatigue I think that a lot of us have been experiencing for years now, where they just don't have the impact and they don't have the drawing power that an event used to have?
No, they absolutely did. You had so many overlapping events happening. It's like Absolute Carnage and Contagion and all these things, all these books that are interconnected, and you've got to buy all these tie-ins for, that was all happening years ago. It's been going on for a while now. And when you count in other companies too, like every company is going to have their events and they're all running at the same time, and they're all running all the time now. It used to be that you would get a big summer event every year. And that would boost sales across the board, and everybody was happy with that. But with diminishing readership based on price and the market factors and things like the stories aren't as good anymore, the art isn't as good, you're getting diminishing returns in sales. So what do? You have to squeeze those people that are left for more money. So more variant covers, more events, overlapping each other. And it's obviously hit a breaking point for a lot of shops. It certainly did for us and did for the shop that you're quoting here.
So the shop we're talking about, the owner's name is Scott Thorne. He's the owner of Castle Perilous Games and Books. And he had a few things to say. He starts out saying, sometimes I wonder if publishers in the comic industry ever look at each other's schedules. Granted, they probably can't cooperate as that is collusion, but geez, maybe try not to step so hard on each other's toes. Maybe a few less events. Some of the comic publishers would be well advised to consider what an event actually is. That is a very good point there at the very end. What is an event anymore? It used to be like the culmination of something. Like maybe you built towards it maybe for 2 or 3 years, and then finally it happens. And obviously it's really big because it affects the entire universe. It feels like the event is just a marketing gimmick at this point. So they feel less and less important. They're less and less impactful because once they start crunching all the events into each other, there's no fallout anymore. The event really only serves to get into the next event. I imagine a lot of readers feel the same way that you and I do, and certainly feel the same way that Scott Thorne, the owner of Castle Perilous Games and Books, do when it comes to events. But they're no longer payoffs. They're supposed to be the big payoff. The reason that you came to the party and you read all these comic books, so eventually they would form into one thing. And now it's just an endless slog of disappointments at this point. Like, they really need to consider what they want out of their events. Like, it can't just be that we had to have an event. And because that's how you get a lot of the stuff that we're getting now.
Yeah, it used to be, you would have something like, think of like just a crossover like Inferno, which was built for years and years and was going to be the big meeting of, the finally X Factor, the original X-Men team and the new X-Men team were going to come face to face with Jean being alive. That was built up over years, and Magic's fall to become the Dark Child built up for years. But, the problem is you don't have that longevity of writers anymore. People dip in for 6 issues or whatever, and then they're out, or, they have these really truncated runs. Or, unfortunately, when you do have a long run from somebody, it's not based on talent. It's based on, their certain demographics and whatnot. And they're just going to be continually given work, no matter the fact that they can't build a story. They can't build an arc. They can't do any of these things that deliver a payoff when you get to the event. So the events are just things that are there to drive sales and to sell a bunch of variant covers. They don't matter. They have no repercussions. You can have null come down and cause all this chaos, and there's no lasting repercussions. It's a lot like the MCU right now. They kind of glossed over the whole snap and and what it means when those people come back. They touched on it in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but they just kind of gloss over it because that's not the fun part. The fun part isn't dealing with the ramifications of what you've written. The fun part is doing all the big things, and that's the interesting part to them. But good storytelling, you have to have consequences to the actions that occur, and so all these events are meaningless because they don't have that.
Yeah, you think about like the first really big DC event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, that probably has more tie-in issues than any event in comic book history because they were literally leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths, I think, for a year. And if you look at the collections that are Crisis on Infinite Earths, it would take you a very long time to get through it. But they're all impactful because they were all building to something. And then when the crisis happened and the end result happened, you felt the ripples in the after effects for years in DC Comics. I mean, that was severely important. You don't get 5 minutes nowadays. Once the event's over, you're just in the other event. You think about Dark Reign that just happened in Marvel. The Kingpin has left. There's a new Kingpin that's taken his place and all this stuff. And it's all going to be glossed over. You're not going to really see how anything's changed because they got to get into the next event that they're doing, whether it be Axe Judgment Day or I guess Hellfire Gala.
Oh, Hellfire Gala. Oh. Hellfire Gala isn't an event as much as it's just a just a dumpster fire. But that is the problem, is that nothing has any meaning, nothing has any consequences. When you think back to Crisis on Infinite Earths, that's back when you actually had real editors that were in charge of their individual offices, and they got together and they had these meetings and they mapped everything out. And now it's just like the Wild West. What Jordan White is doing doesn't affect this over here. They don't talk. So it doesn't feel like a cohesive universe anymore. It just feels like a bunch of randomly disconnected events. And maybe that's by design because they just don't have the talent anymore, or they don't have the interest. But it's definitely hurting comic books as a whole. It's hurting the stories, and it's hurting shops.
This is what Scott Thorne from Castle Perilous Games had to say kind of about the schedule that they're going to. Marvel just wrapped up its Darkhold and Devil's Reign series, and without a breather has moved on into the Avengers X-Men Eternals crossover Judgment Day plus Hellfire Gala storyline. There are probably some other crossovers I may have missed. Meanwhile, over at DC, the Batman Shadow War storyline wraps up this month, only pushed into Dark Crisis next month. It used to be that an event was just that, an event. It ran across several issues, typically during the summer months, and then wrapped up with a new event starting the following summer. Now it appears comic publishers are hooked on the sales bump they get from the multi-issue events. Combine that with the sales bump they see from introducing a new character with the potential to become the next hot property, and I can see continued overload continuing for the next few years. I think he's right in that prognostication that there's no way that this is going to end anytime soon, because they can't sell on quality right now. So they're having to do any type of marketing gimmick, whether it be introducing a new character, saying an event, that's going to be really important or whatever, mantle swaps, sexuality swaps. It's all this stuff on the external. It's never about the characters and the quality of the stories anymore. And that's really at the heart of the issue with everything that's going on with Marvel and DC.
Nobody's allowed to build anything anymore. You're not allowed to, you don't have these architects who, like Chris Claremont, who like over years are like putting all of these little, bricks in the wall and can jump around to, any one of them at any time and give you an explosive story. It's really unfortunate. Everything's just coherent and just incoherent and random. And, you're exactly right. They're just jumping from event to event because that's all that they have left. There's no creativity left. So all that you've got left is marketing. And what does marketing have? Marketing has mantle and sexuality swaps that, ultimately kill sales on the book, but, it gave us that one issue bump, and that's all that they're looking at is the short-term gain. So you take a book like Superman, Son of Kal-El, and it got that one issue sales bump for the coming out issue because it got all this attention and people speculated on that issue. But right afterwards it cratered and it's down in the dumpsters again. Because the fact of the matter is that you're pushing something that your readership doesn't want. The amount of people that read comics is very small. And then if you take the amount of gay people that read comics and that might be interested in that story, that's even smaller. So you're appealing to the most niche of audiences with these mantle and sexuality swaps, and ultimately they kill the sales on your book because you're no longer telling a compelling or interesting story. It's now just all about that swap. And then with the other things that marketing does is pump out a bunch of covers. So you get a bunch of, people with disposable income that are still hanging on, never read the books, that just buy the covers and bag them up and think, okay, well, that's an investment. I've got those, those rare covers, the 1 in 25 and the 1 in 100. That's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And we've been saying it for a long time, and the numbers continue to go down. And, as much as they like to tell us, oh, the industry's doing great, look at all these sales. The growth in sales is not happening in American comic books, in Western superhero comic books. It's happening in manga. It's happening in young adult, and they can try and tie it all together. But, comics just receives like a mild swelling, not any real growth.
And one of the bad parts about that is their business partners, the comic book retailers, they're relying less on the new comic books because they know the quality's not there, and you have to do some marketing schemes and you got to play the game there. And they become more reliant on back issues and speculators and stuff like that. But we are heading towards a bad economy in the U.S. There are a lot of warning signs that people are going to have much less disposable income in the future. And DC and Marvel have really been courting readers with disposable income. They haven't been courting people saying, this is your form of entertainment. You need to be in your comic shop every week because we have the best stories possible for you. They've said, we've got a new character, or look at this cover. You need to come in and buy that. You don't even read the book. And when people have to close their wallets and they have to start making these difficult decisions on, I have less money to invest, where should I invest it? I think there's a lot of fallout that's going to be coming for the American comic book industry this year, and I think it's going to be really, really negative.
I mean, you're already seeing it. We're already seeing a downturn in people's disposable income because, of course, the price of food has gone through the roof, the price of gas has gone through the roof, heating, everything that people, normally have kind of a set expenditure on is spiraling out of control under this administration. So, you're seeing a lot less disposable income. We're definitely probably headed towards a recession, as economists are saying. So, yeah, you're going to see people guarding their wallets a lot more, and they don't have the money for this kind of nonsense. So these tried and true methods of squeezing blood from a stone that the comic industry is dependent upon, a lot of those are going to go away. And what are you left with? You're left with overpriced books by substandard creators, and people are going to walk away. They're not going to spend, no matter how hard no matter how addicted they are to this hobby. And let's be honest, it is an addiction. This hobby tends to appeal to people who have OCD, who have certain, who are very susceptible to that sort of thing. The collector mentality. Eventually that breaks if you can't afford food or you can't afford to get to work.
I do think the short-term marketing and the short-term ideas that you've been talking about here, certainly that the retailer was talking about in that article I mentioned, they are just that. They're short-term stopgap measures to make the appearance of a more healthy stream of comic books as far as sales and whatnot. But, eventually the chickens do come home to roost. And the fact that they've invested so little into the quality, they've invested so little into making these events meaningful. An event should be something that people notice, like, I haven't been able to, I've been able to afford this, but this event is important to me. Let me see if I can scratch up a little extra money, and I would like to read this right here because it's going to be important. It's kind of lost that luster. So you have to do something new even to draw people in, because the things that they normally associated with quality and importance in the past just aren't there anymore.
In years past, Dark Crisis would have been a big event and it would have sold, exceptionally well, and people would have been talking about it. And instead, nobody's really talking about it. It didn't sell exceptionally well. It just was based on the most immediate idea that you could think of. Like when I first heard it and it was like Dark Crisis, I was like, okay, well, that's the most basic bitch name that you could give it. And then it was like, yeah, and the bad guys are the Dark Army. And I'm like, how much thought did you put into this? Like almost none, it feels like. And so that, that gets turned out on the comic book shelf and fans say, no, thank you. I'm done with this.
Yeah. And the fact that it's, less than 2 years after the last Crisis event that DC has done. So I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen. I'd love retail.
Oh, are you referring to Heroes in Crisis?
No, I was talking about Dark Knight's Death Metal.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because Heroes in Crisis was more of a crisis on the writing side than it was anything else.
Yeah. No, I don't want to even think about that comic book. But, I hope these things don't happen because I love my friends that are retailers. You know, I want comic shops to be out there, and I want them to be there forever. I don't want to see a day where I'm alive where there isn't a comic shop for people to go to and enjoy and talk about comic books and whatnot. But I've just seen so many poor decisions, and the emphasis in FOSS's placed in the wrong places within the comic book industry that I just feel like they set themselves up for massive failure. And I hope they don't bring down a lot of really good people that have put their blood, sweat, and tears in the comic book industry to support Marvel and DC and some of the other publishers when they never really supported them back. And it kind of feels like that might be where we're heading.
Yeah, if you're a retailer, I mean, the best thing that I can tell you right now is that if more than 10% of your business is invested in new comics, you need to change that immediately. Because when the crash happens, you're going to be caught with your pants down. And I don't want to see anybody do that. There's still a great collector market out there. Unfortunately, it's just not for new comic books. So, you know, transition accordingly.
This isn't the first time we've talked about the short-sightedness and the way events have been essentially marginalized within comic books. We knew DC comic books were going in 2022. I talk about it at the end of 2021, talk about some of the issues, why this is a bad decision. Definitely got a lot more information and insight in this video here if you want to find out more about the problem with events in comics.